Under the blinding white lights of the galactic arena, the roar of 1,000,000 voices thundered like a living storm, banners from 100 alien worlds rippling in the artificial wind. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the sound of the crowd. And the deep metallic hum of the force field walls, sealing the combat zone in the center of that massive ring, stood Serena Kale. Her dark eyes locked on the far gate where her opponent waited to enter. Her arms hung loose by her sides, wrapped tightly. In silver restraints, glowing faintly with the seal of the War Game Council, a constant reminder of the punishment that had brought her here. She could not raise them. She could not clench her fists. She was forbidden from even touching her enemy. With her hands, the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, carried by invisible speakers into every mind watching from every planet. They called her the human without hands, though she had them perfectly whole, perfectly strong. They might as well be gone, because in this war game, rules were as dangerous as weapons. They said she had broken an alien warlord's arm in the last tournament, too brutally, too fast. The council decided she was dangerous in the wrong way, and so they banned her from using her arms ever again. But Serena did not protest. She had stared at the judges with the same steady look she had now, and simply said one thing: "I do not need them." The crowd cheered and laughed, some in mockery, some in awe. The gate across. From her shuttered open, with a deep rumble, and her opponent stepped through. It was a hulking alien warrior from the Zarth Dominion, its skin like jagged stone. 4 muscular arms, each gripping a plasma blade that shimmered with deadly heat. Its eyes glowed like molten gold, scanning her as if measuring her worth. She could hear the snickers from the alien commentators in their floating hover pods above her. They were betting on how quickly she would fall. Serena bent her knees, feeling the weight of her own body, the memory of her old training surging back, her grandfather's voice echoing in her mind. "You fight with your whole body, not just your hands. Your legs can break bone. Your feet can end wars." The horn blared so loud it shook. Her chest and the Zarth warrior moved first blades, cutting arcs of bright light through the air. Serena exploded forward, her feet pounding the arena floor. The sound of her first step was like a gunshot echoing under the dome, her speed startled. The alien enough to make it hesitate one fraction of a second, she used it. She slid low, twisting her hips and driving her heel into the warrior's knee joint. A hollow crack rang out. The alien roared, swinging a blade downward, but Serena rolled. Sideways, coming up to her feet with fluid speed, she kept moving, never letting him trap her between his 4 arms. The crowd's laughter faded, replaced by murmurs of surprise. Every time her foot struck, it was precise, brutal, aimed for a weak point. She could feel the vibration of each impact running up her legs like electricity. The alien came harder now, faster, its blades slicing the air inches from her face, heat from the plasma licking her skin. But she was already in the air, spinning her whole body into a kick that slammed into his chest, forcing him back one step, just one. But the crowd gasped. It was the first time anyone had pushed this warrior backward. She landed softly, her eyes never leaving his. She breathed slow, deep in control. The Zarth warrior bellowed his rage, charging at her with all 4 arms raised for the killing blow. The arena floor trembled under his weight. Serena waited until the very last heartbeat, her knees bent, her muscles coiled like a spring, and as his blades came down, she launched herself upward, soaring higher than the alien expected, her body twisting in midair. The light from the blades passing beneath her feet. The crowd froze, holding its collective breath. She was above him now in the open, space where his arms could not reach her. And as gravity began to pull her down, she let a small, sharp smile touch her lips, knowing that the next moment would decide everything. The crowd was still holding its breath as Serena descended the air whipping. Past her face, the alien's head tilting upward, too slow, too surprised to react. Her heel came down with the force of a meteor, smashing into the side of its jaw. The sound was sickening, Even through the thick roar that followed the strike, the warrior stumbled crashing sideways into the arena wall with a snarl of rage, the plasma blades flickering in its hands. Serena landed in a crouch, her eyes locked on him, her legs steady, though the shock of the impact burned through her muscles. The crowd erupted in shouts and screams, some chanting her name, others jeering. The alien fought to regain its balance, the jagged stone plates of its skin shifting and cracking where she had struck. She could see a thin line of dark molten blood running down. From the corner of its mouth, she straightened slowly, keeping her stance low, her breathing even. The warrior lunged again, swinging two blades toward her in a sweeping arc, while the other two came down like hammers. But Serena's feet were all ready. Moving faster than his eyes could follow, she darted to the side, then leapt high, planting both feet against the arena wall and springing off it to deliver another kick this time, to the back of his neck. The blow snapped his head forward with a violent jerk. He staggered, his claws scraping against the floor. Serena did not give him time to recover. She spun on her heel, pivoting into a sharp roundhouse kick that caught his ribs. The crack of breaking armor made the front rows scream. The alien roared again, dropping one blade, his movements growing sluggish from the damage the human fighter had already done. She could see the disbelief in his molten gold eyes. They had told him this would be easy, that the human would crumble without her hands. But now every strike she landed made him doubt that every dodge made him realize she was playing a different game. He tried to corner her, forcing her toward the wall. Serena's mind raced. She knew she could not get trapped. His size and strength would crush her in close quarters at the last second before he boxed her in. She slid low again, sweeping his legs with a brutal kick to the knee. The warrior crashed to one side but used his extra arms to catch himself before hitting the floor. Serena saw her opening. She stepped in close and leapt, spinning her body mid-air, her foot slamming into the side of his head. A second time, the alien's massive body hit the ground. The arena shook under the impact, dust and shards of broken plating rising into the air. The crowd exploded, half in shock, half in wild excitement. Serena backed away, her chest rising and falling quickly. She could feel the ache building in her calves and thighs, but she ignored it. The Zarth warrior lay still. For a moment then, with a deep guttural snarl, he forced himself to his knees, lifting his head toward her. His eyes burned hotter than before, as if her kicks had only woken something inside him. The remaining blades in his hands lit brighter with lethal heat. And he rose again, taller and angrier than ever. The commentators shouted in a dozen languages, broadcasting across the galaxy about the strange human who fought with nothing but her legs. Serena knew she had to end this before he adapted. She began to circle him, her feet light on the floor, waiting for his next move. He swung at her in a blur of blazing steel and molten fury. She ducked once, twice, three times, each dodge bringing her closer until she was within striking range. Then she spun fast, her body a whip of muscle and speed, the heel of her boot smashing into his temple with perfect precision. The alien froze for a heartbeat, his weapons clattering to the floor, his eyes rolling back as his massive frame toppled sideways. The sound of his fall rolled through the arena like distant thunder, and the crowd rose to its feet, shouting in disbelief. Serena stood over him, her arms still bound by the silver restraints, her breathing heavy, but her eyes calm. The match horn blared, signaling the end. The announcer's voice filled the air, declaring her the winner against impossible odds. Her name echoed from every corner of the arena, and even from the alien sections came reluctant applause. She turned her gaze upward, to the hovering judges who now looked at her with something more than curiosity. There was caution, there was respect, as she walked out of the arena, the crowd's roar following her. She caught sight of the tournament brackets, flashing on the massive hollow screen above her name. Now moved into the next round, and below it, the face of her next opponent appeared, a thin alien with pale silver skin and eyes like twin voids. The screen labeled him with a single word. Gravemaster, she had heard of his. kind. They could twist gravity itself, bending weight and movement into weapons for a fighter like her who depended entirely on speed and force of legs. This would be worse than fighting with her hands tied. This would be fighting without ground. To stand on, she kept walking, the noise of the arena fading behind her, but her mind sharpening around one single thought. They believed they had found the perfect way to stop her. Yet even in the silence, she could hear her grandfather's voice. Again, there is always another way. The training chamber was quiet except for the slow hum of the artificial lights above and the faint hiss of air moving through the vents. Serena stood in the center, her legs aching from hours of drills, but her mind locked on the name she had seen. On the tournament bracket, Gravemaster. She had fought opponents who were stronger, faster, heavier, and armed with weapons that could cut through steel. But gravity, that was different. Gravity was not something you could block or dodge. It was invisible. It was everywhere. She had studied the few recordings that existed of his fights. His opponents had been pulled to the ground until their bones cracked or sent floating helplessly in the air until a final strike ended them. She replayed one clip, over and over, watching the way his pale silver fingers moved, the way the air shimmered faintly around him before the sudden shift in weight. The day of the match came too quickly. The arena was even louder than before. The alien crowd restless, curious, to see if the human could survive this. Round the commentators spoke in rapid bursts, explaining how no fighter had ever truly adapted to Gravemaster's power in the ring. The silver-skinned alien entered, moving with slow, measured steps, as if he carried no weight at all, his black eyes fixed on her like two empty holes in the world. Serena felt the air change around her before the horn even sounded. It was a subtle shift, a heaviness pressing against her shoulders. She widened her stance, feeling the pull like a giant hand pushing her toward the floor. The horn blared, and instantly the pressure doubled. Her knees bent to keep from collapsing. She gritted her teeth, forcing her legs to hold steady. The alien raised one long arm, and the floor beneath her seemed to tilt her balance, sliding away. She jumped to the side, but instead of landing, she floated the ground, falling away from her like she was in open space. The crowd roared, seeing the human trapped in zero gravity. Her first instinct was panic. Her legs flailed with nothing solid to push against the Gravemaster, moved toward her slowly, almost lazily, twisting his wrist to send her drifting into the air. Above him, he raised his other hand, clearly ready to slam her down into the ground with crushing force. But the panic faded as Serena's mind shifted gears. She remembered her grandfather's words about fighting in the wind, about using anything solid as a weapon. Her eyes darted around the arena, scanning the walls, the scattered debris from previous matches, the floating shards of broken metal caught in the low gravity. Her fingers might be bound, but her feet were free. And so was her mind. She twisted her body sharply, her boot catching against a drifting piece of metal. She pushed off with all the force in her leg, launching herself toward the wall. When she hit it, she bent her knees and kicked off again, this time flying toward the alien from above. Gravemaster's empty eyes flickered with surprise. Serena spun mid-air, her heel slicing through the space between them and slamming into his shoulder. The impact was strong enough to send him sliding back, though he caught himself quickly with another gravity shift. He tried to pin her mid-air, locking her in a weightless trap. But Serena had already shifted her plan. She kicked against the very air currents his power created, using his own gravity fields to propel herself in sharp, unpredictable bursts. She became a blur in the zero gravity, spinning, bouncing off walls, ricocheting from debris, each strike from her boots landing faster, harder. Gravemaster's calm movements grew more frantic, his hands slicing through the air to regain control, but she was always a fraction of a second. Ahead, the crowd was no longer laughing. They were leaning forward, shouting in disbelief as the human without hands turned the deadliest power in the games into her personal battlefield. Then she saw her chance. His control slipped for half a heartbeat, and she drove both heels into his chest with the force of a charging beast. The alien flew backward, crashing into the arena wall, the impact shaking the force fields that held the crowd safe. He staggered, trying to regain his grip on the invisible forces. But Serena was already on him, twisting through the air in a final spinning kick to the side of his head. Gravemaster crumpled weight, returning to the arena with a heavy thud, both fighters dropping to the ground. The horn blared the match. Was over. The announcer's voice rang out over the deafening roar, calling her the victor again. Serena stood breathing hard, sweat sliding down her face, her legs trembling from the effort, but her eyes sharp. She looked up at the tournament brackets. Once more her name now moved to the semi-finals, and beside it the image of a creature unlike anything she had seen before. Massive hulking armor plated with a tail like a scythe and eyes burning with red fire. The champion of the last 3 war. Games undefeated, feared across the galaxy. The screen named him only the Beast. And as the crowd screamed in anticipation, Serena felt a cold thrill run down her spine, knowing the next fight would push her beyond anything she had faced before. The day of the semifinals arrived under a storm of light and sound, the arena brighter than ever. The crowd already restless from the earlier matches, but the moment Serena's name appeared on the colossal holo screens, the noise changed. It was sharper, louder, carrying the weight of expectation. She had done the impossible twice, and the galaxy wanted to see if the human without hands could do it again. The gates on the far side opened with a grinding roar, and the Beast emerged, each step shaking. The floor, his body was covered in armor plates, the color of scorched iron. His shoulders broader than 2 men standing side by side. A massive tail swung lazily behind him, ending in a blade curved like a scythe. Each step left a shallow dent in the reinforced arena floor. His head tilted forward, eyes glowing with deep red light, his claws like hooked spears. The air around him seemed to hum with danger. Serena watched him carefully, her breathing steady, her mind working at the speed of survival. There was no obvious weak spot, no gap in the armor. Every part of him looked like a weapon. The horn sounded, and the Beast moved faster than she expected, his huge frame lunging forward in a burst of speed that blurred his outline. His clawed hand swiped at her, and she rolled sideways, feeling the rush of air as it passed close enough to tear the ends of her hair. She was back on her feet instantly, her legs tense, ready for the next attack. He didn't give her time to strike, forcing her to keep dodging, each blow coming from a different angle. Claws, tail, shoulder slams, every movement designed to crush or cut. She tried to find a pattern, but his attacks were relentless. A storm with no rhythm, he drove her toward the wall of the arena. The crowd roaring for the kill. She feinted left, then suddenly leapt high, twisting in midair to deliver a kick at the side of his head, but the strike clanged off his armor like steel against steel, sending a jolt through her leg. She landed hard, gritting her teeth. The Beast's head turned slowly toward her, as if amused. His tail lashed forward with blinding speed. She barely jumped, clear feeling the wind of its passing as it cut a deep line into the floor behind her. She began to move, faster, forcing herself into a rhythm, weaving between his blows, not trying to strike, yet only searching, watching. Waiting for that one moment, his size and strength made him confident too. Confident, and she needed to use that. The chance came when he lunged with both claws, extended his momentum, carrying him forward just a little too far. Serena darted to the side, planting one foot on his forearm and springing upward, her other foot driving toward the exposed joint at his neck just beneath the helmet-like armor. The impact was small but sharp enough to make him grunt, his claws swiping upward. Too late, she landed behind him and immediately spun, delivering another kick to the same spot, this time harder. His roar shook the arena. The tail whipped toward her again, and she ducked, rolling under it and striking his knee joint. As she passed, her strikes were working, but only in the smallest of ways, and she knew small would not be enough. The Beast turned his whole body, crashing toward her with the weight of a collapsing wall. She jumped sideways, but his claw still caught her shoulder, the force sending her tumbling across the floor. Pain lanced down her arm. Though she felt no bone break, she got to her feet, legs steady, forcing her body to ignore the ache. The crowd was in a frenzy, now half shouting for her to fall, half urging her on. The beast came again and again. She dodged, but each time closer to being caught, until finally he raised both claws overhead and slammed them down where she stood. She rolled forward between his legs, spinning into a low, sweeping kick at the back of his knee. The joint buckled his massive frame, dropping just slightly, and she used it. She planted both feet against his back, armor, and pushed off, flying high into the air above him. The crowd gasped, seeing her silhouetted against the glaring lights. She spun in the air, a full rotation, her heel aimed once again at that narrow gap at the neck armor below, and as she fell, she could see the beast starting to turn his glowing eyes, tracking her descent. The beast's head snapped upward, his glowing red eyes locking on her mid-air descent, his massive claw rising to intercept, but she was already twisting her body tighter, pulling every ounce of strength into her core and driving her heel down toward that exposed joint at the base of his neck. The impact cracked against him with a force that sent a shiver up her leg and forced his head forward with a snarl. The blow stunned him for only a heartbeat, but it was enough for her to land roll clear and reset her stance. The crowd roared, their voices blending into one wall of sound. The beast shook himself like a predator, shrugging off a sting, his tail slicing the air in an arc that forced her to leap back, the bladed tip missing her by less than an inch. He came at her again, each step exploding against the floor, the sound like thunderclaps. Serena moved in a blur, dodging under his claws, spinning away from the tail lashing toward her. But every near miss made her legs burn and her lungs ache. She knew she could not simply avoid him forever. The beast's attacks were designed to break opponents down little by little until there was nothing left to fight back with, and if she lost her speed even for a moment, it would be over his. Roar rolled through the arena as he lunged again, this time using his entire weight to slam into the ground where she stood. The shock wave from the impact sent her skidding across the floor, her breath knocked from her chest. She barely rolled aside. As his claws tore through the space where she had been seconds before, she pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the ringing in her ears and the heaviness creeping into her muscles. She thought of her grandfather's training, his words about patience and timing, about how power meant nothing if it could not land. The moment to strike would not come from chasing it, but from letting it come to her. The beast swung his tail again. This time she ducked under it instead of jumping, and as it passed, she stepped in close, so close she could see her own reflection in the red glow of his eyes, and then she spun low, her leg snapping upward in a kick to the inside of his knee joint. The joint buckled again, harder this time, his huge frame dipping. Down, she used his drop to leap upward, planting one foot on his thigh and springing toward that same vulnerable point on his neck armor. The crowd's roar swelled, but at the last instant, the beast twisted his body and she struck, only hardened. Plating! The jolt rattled her teeth and sent her spinning away, hitting the floor in a hard roll before bouncing to her feet. Her legs throbbed with pain. Her breathing was sharp and ragged. The beast's laugh was low and rumbling, the sound of a predator who thought the hunt was ending. He stepped toward her, claws flexing, ready to end it. But Serena forced herself to straighten her back, her gaze steady on him. She could not show the pain. She could not show that her legs were shaking. The beast came again, and this time she met him head-on, dodging the first claw, the second claw, the downward slam, and as his arms were still extended, she spun in close, her heel smashing into his side just beneath the arm plate. The blow made him grunt. She spun again, delivering a second strike to the same spot, then a third, each one faster than the last. The armor began to dent the red glow of his eyes, flickering with anger. He tried to grab her, but she was already gone, sliding under his arm, too, his back, and delivering a sharp kick to the base of his tail. The impact made him roar and whirl around in fury, his movements growing less precise, more aggressive, exactly what she needed. The next lunge he made came with too much speed and not enough control, and she was ready. She sidestepped, planting her foot on his leg and vaulting upward again, this time. Both feet striking together against the vulnerable joint at his neck, the force drove him down onto one knee, his claws digging into the floor. She landed behind him, spinning for another kick, when his tail whipped around faster than she expected, catching her mid-torso and sending her crashing into the arena wall. Pain exploded through her ribs and the silver restraints on her. Arms bit into her skin. She slid down to one knee, her vision flashing white. The beast rose again, towering above her, closing in for the final strike, the crowd screaming for the kill. But deep in her chest, she felt the stubborn fire that had carried her through every fight. She pushed to her feet, her legs screaming in protest, her gaze locked on the monster who believed he had already won. The beast loomed over her, his massive shadow swallowing her small frame, his claws spread wide, the red glow in his eyes flaring brighter with every step. The sound of his breathing was a deep, mechanical growl. The crowd's roar shook the air, but Serena heard none of it. Her focus narrowed to the movement of his body, the angle of his steps, the rhythm of his attacks. Her ribs ached with every breath. Her legs felt heavy as stone, but the fire in her chest burned hotter than the pain. The beast lunged, both claws swinging down like twin guillotines. She rolled forward between his legs, the metal floor, scraping against her knees before she sprang back to her feet behind him. He spun instantly, his tail whipping toward her, but this time she was ready. She leapt over the bladed arc, twisting in the air, to land a sharp kick to the base of the tail. The blow staggered him a fraction of a step. She landed and struck again, then again, each kick hitting the same spot with ruthless precision, the dent in his armor deepening, the red glow in his eyes flaring with rage. The beast roared and charged, his bulk smashing forward with enough force to crush anything in his path. But Serena didn't retreat. She sprinted toward him, meeting the charge head-on. At the last second, she slid low, letting his claws pass over her as she kicked upward into the inside of his knee. The joint cracked with a sound that made the front rows gasp. His massive frame dipped down again. She planted one foot on his thigh and launched herself upward, her other leg coiled for the strike. This time, her heel came down hard on the narrow gap in his neck armor. The impact sent a sharp vibration up her leg and forced his head forward with a grunt, but he did not fall. Not yet. She landed on his back, twisting to avoid the tail that lashed toward her and kicked. Off into the air, she hit the ground in a crouch, her eyes locked on him. The beast roared louder than ever, charging once more, his movements growing less controlled, every step fueled by fury rather than precision. Serena sidestepped his first swipe, ducked. The second then leapt over the third, spinning in midair to slam her heel into the side of his head. The blow turned him slightly, and she used the moment to sprint to his flank. Every kick she delivered now aimed for weak points, the inside of the knee, the joint of the hip, the base of the tail, the gap in the armor at his neck. Each strike forcing him lower, forcing him slower. The crowd's roar shifted from bloodthirsty to awestruck as they began to realize what was happening. The undefeated champion was being broken down piece by a human with her hands bound. The beast swung again in desperation, claws cutting the air so close she felt the wind burn her cheek, but she slipped past him one final time, planting both feet solidly on the floor. Her legs coiling with every last drop of strength, she had her gaze locked on that gap in his armor. She sprinted forward, leaping high onto his bent knee, then to his shoulder, and from there pushing off into the air above him, the lights of the arena flashing against the silver restraints on her wrists. Her body spun in a perfect arc, her heel aimed like a blade at the vulnerable spot, and when it connected, the sound was like a crack of thunder, the beast's roar. Cut short, his massive frame collapsing forward, hitting the floor with an impact that shook the entire arena. The crowd went silent for a heartbeat, then erupted into chaos. The horn blared, the announcer's voice trembling as it declared the unthinkable. The human without hands had defeated the champion of the war games. Serena stood over the fallen giant, her breathing ragged, her legs trembling, but her gaze steady. The restraints still glowing around her wrists, as if mocking the fact that she had never needed her hands at all. The alien crowd was on its feet, some screaming in outrage, others in wild admiration. Even the judges who had banned her from using her arms were leaning forward in shock. The roar of the arena washed over her like a wave. But she felt only the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had proven them all wrong. She turned and walked toward the exit, her steps slow but unbroken, the silver restraints catching the light one last time as she left the ring. The final words of the announcer echoing across the galaxy, they took away her hands, but they could not take away her victory.